Hi, everyone. I see folks. Lots of birthday love for you, Irene. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to Maddie's Community Conversations. We're so glad you can be here today. I am one of your hosts, Sheila Kukan, and I'm really excited to be back with my host for January, Miguel Ruelas. Miguel is an industry leader with over 15 years of experience in animal welfare and social justice, having worked at national organizations, including the ASPCA and CARE. Today, Miguel is a community resources manager at Pasadena Humane and is also one of the founders and directors of Petitas y Palabras Translation Services and serves on the board of directors for Heart LA. Miguel's experience in animal welfare is grounded in a human-centered, equity-driven, and community-focused approach. And I'm so happy that I got to host with you, Miguel, in January. I hope you'll be back. Thank you so much. And everyone join me in welcoming back Miguel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this month. It was such a good way to start my year. And I'm sad that it's the last one, but I'm sure the next host is going to be amazing. Um, so thank you. And I am going to take a super quick moment to just kind of acknowledge things that are happening in the world. Animal welfare does not live in a vacuum, and we are deeply affected every day, especially folks in sheltering, by all of the things that are happening, and our neighbors and our community members being kidnapped and murdered in the streets is, affects us very much. So I did want to take a moment to acknowledge that, to make sure that we are saying things out loud, and taking advantage of the platform that I have here. So thank you. And I will, this is also a great space for distraction for some of that. So I will continue to move it along. And our question of the day today is, what is a habit you're proud of building or breaking?
Lots of love for you in the chat, Miguel. And folks, let us know your habits. Do you have any habits you're building or breaking, Miguel?
Ooh, Lord, I have so many that I need to break. Um, as I've gotten older, it's gotten like I'm better at starting my day quickly. I would always drag it out, but now I'm just like, you know what? Let's just get it going and like not drag it out too much. So that was a rough one. And now I see it in my kid, where they're like, oh, I just want 5 more minutes. I'm like, no, let's build this now. Like, let's just get this going. How about you, Sheila?
I have a bad habit of going on my phone first thing in the morning. So, like you said, there's a lot of heavy stuff going on. So I try to not go on my phone. I like to get a little bit grounded, to go outside a bit, get some sunshine, and then check social media. So, yeah, I see Allison said that in the chat as well.
I see the eat three frogs before breakfast. I've heard that one before,
Yeah.
where it's like do the hard things
Yep.
first, right? Like just get them
Ye-
out the way. Yep.
Yep, absolutely.
This is a good one. Stopped biting your nails at 55.
I feel like COVID gave me that one because I like stopped putting my hands anywhere near my face during COVID because I was like, oh, I don't want to get sick. And then moving your body every day. Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, Amber, a 30-day social media break. That is probably really good to do right now, too. Well, folks, definitely keep letting us know in the chat. Thank you for these great responses and great ideas for habits that I should also be breaking. And if anyone has any national updates, please go ahead and let us know in the chat as well. We'll be sure to share those on Maddie's Pet Forum, and you're always welcome to share on Maddie's Pet Forum too. So we'll drop that link in the chat.
Okay. There's no the national updates, right? They're going in the chat. Cool.
Yes.
So I will jump into introducing our speaker for today. Um, Very excited to introduce TyAnn Sumpter, Manager of Shelter Support at Charleston Animal Society. TyAnn is an animal welfare professional who brings a strong operations mindset and a background in entrepreneurship. I'm so sorry, that word is hard for me. Entrepreneurship to her word. Before entering sheltering, she ran a successful business where she learned the value of clear systems, customer service, and consistent workflows. For the past 3 years, TyAnn has applied those same principles to animal welfare. Her approach centers on treating every adopter, foster, donor, and community member as a valued partner. TyAnn believes that while passion brings us into this field, structure is what allows us to save more lives. She focuses on practical, people-centered solutions that support staff, volunteers, and animals alike. Thank you for being here, TyAnn, and everyone, please join me in welcoming TyAnn.
Hi guys. I am very excited. I'm going to share my screen in a second to kind of show you guys what I'm going to be talking about. So give me 1 second because I practiced this and I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Let's see. All right, share. So hopefully everybody can see and it looks clear for you guys.
Yep, looks great.
Perfect. Okay, so let's start with slide one. Okay, so I want to thank Miguel and Sheila for introducing me. And I also want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to join these calls. As Miguel said, this is a really heavy time for everybody in the world. And so having to set some time aside to still continue your education and continue to want to connect with others, I know that it means a lot, especially for us in animal welfare. Everything's very high strung sometimes. And so we're just kind of chasing that next thing that we can do. And so I want to go a little bit more over my background. My background is a mix of sheltering and small business ownership. These two worlds have really shaped how I see life saving. And so this is more of a conversation. This is not going to be a lecture. I am going to have data and things to show you guys, but I'm really going to be storytelling and explaining to you guys how you can see these in practice. And so I think it's important for us to note that, not everything needs to be a lecture. I want us to all feel comfortable with the information that I'm giving you guys. And I'm very excited about talking about this. I know at the end we'll kind of go over how you guys can connect with me. But as you'll see the theme throughout this, I get very passionate when I get to talk about the business aspects. It is one of my favorite things to do, and I just love explaining things to people. So let's kind of get started. If you guys can see on the slides, I kind of have the bare bones of what I deem to be the business model of life saving. And so you can kind of see I've put it down very strategically, but also easy for everybody to digest. And so if I want to start off, by saying, I want to ground us with the core idea that shelters are already operating like businesses, whether we mean to or not. Every day we manage people, we manage spaces, we manage outcomes. And the difference is whether we're doing this work intentionally or reactively. And like I said, it's very hard for us in animal welfare because things change often, things happen every single day. And so it's important to make sure that we remember that even though we kind of know what our mission is going to be, we need to make sure we stay grounded in that. And so I think life saving works best when you see this operational cycle. And so if you guys look, it says mission equals your clear purpose, annual goals, measurable directions, weekly actions, execution, and data adjustments and accountability. And so the first thing we need to start with is a clear mission. And I know that pretty much everybody in this call has a mission statement somewhere, whether it is in your employee handbook, whether it's in the lobby, whether it's just somewhere on your website. But I want to get back to the core of what a mission statement really means. And like I said, I have a business background. So the first thing that I did when I helped businesses start up was we wrote down a mission statement. It wasn't very long, but it was something clear to make sure that it was enough to help us guide decisions. So if you are somebody that's in this call and you do not have a mission statement, I have a task for you. When you get off this call, I definitely want you to reach out to your organization, whether it's just you, whether you're a big organization or a small one, and make sure you have a very clear mission statement. A lot of times what happens is organizations, they get started, they have a mission, and they don't realize over the years their goals change and they never update their mission statement. And I think for a lot of people, we have it somewhere, like I said, and you don't realize that people are actually looking at that information. When they're Googling your websites, when they're going into your organizations, they're looking for your mission statement. And if it's not up to date to what you have going on now, it's really hard to value if you are heading in the right direction. So the best thing to do is start with your mission statement, and every decision from there you should ask yourself the question, does this align with why we exist? And I think that's important because every time we do something new, whether we're implementing a new program, whether we're helping a new community member, that mission statement really makes us helps make us helps us to make the best decisions possible. And another thing to go with that mission statement is I really think it's important to revisit it and reevaluate it. Like I stated before, I think that sometimes we have these mission statements, we're legacy organizations, and oftentimes we don't reevaluate them. We don't change them when staffing change. We don't change them when national trends change. So I think it's important to actively use your mission statement and to actively update it. And one thing I want to really point out for this slide is no matter how large your organization is, whether you're a municipal shelter or a nonprofit or a rescue, or it's just you and your friend, everything that's on this slide can be translated to your organization. Your mission leads to your goals, and your goals lead to your action, and your action leads to outcomes. And I think that's really important to think about it in that way, because when you break it down in that manner, it makes it easier to digest when you're explaining things to your organization. This is what our mission is, this is what our goal is, and this is how that outcome came out of that. And so it kind of goes into the next step of setting those goals. And so, of course, I am very grateful to be able to do this so early in the year, because this is the perfect time we all set annual goals. So I have another task. If you don't have any annual goals set up with your organization, I feel like this is the perfect time to get started. It's really important to make sure that you have that measurable direction. So if in the beginning of the year we set out to expand our organization 10 employees, we need to make sure that that's set up so that we can keep checking back in with each other, whether it's weekly, quarterly, monthly. And I really think it's important because you have that mission statement, you have those goals, and now we need to make it actionable. And so breaking those larger goals down throughout the year, it really helps unify your organization, I would like to say as well, because you're having more meetings. We know that at the top of the year, we set out to have this goal, and now we need to be checking in with each other consistently, regardless of what the department is. And another way I like to explain it to people is if you have a goal, say that you want to get 30 more dogs adopted this month. So if you give that blanket statement to your organization, to your team, that's not very actionable, because depending on where they are in your department, they're all going to see that differently. So your behavioral team is going to look at 30 more dogs getting out in a different way than your adoption team is, than your foster team, than your medical team. And so I think it's really important to ground those goals and make sure that everybody's prioritizing what's the best for your organization. And I feel like what happens a lot of times is when you have a goal, it gives your team clarity. And so meetings can create alignment, making sure that we're all on the right page. We set that goal, it goes with our mission statement, and now we can check back in with everybody so we can make sure that we're on the right page. And so, as you guys can see from this one, I really wanted to kind of go over how you can see that in person, how you can see it clearly goes into the next thing. And then the key idea, like I said, your shelter is already a business, your rescue is already a business. And so we really need to lean into that. And while we are not the same as a for-profit organization, we don't operate the same as Walmart or Target. We really do in the end goal. We have to make sure that we're also always updating ourselves. We're always updating the community. And a lot of times with for-profit, because it is about a monetary gain, they're usually more aggressive in their approach. We see this happen all the time where organizations don't mind changing anything at the drop of a dime, regardless of what the customer says, because they're for the profit. So if they need to take your favorite drink off the menu, or if they need to add 10 more drinks to the menu, they're going to make those changes. We usually don't operate that way because animal welfare is more emotionally charged. And so while we're practical at times, we're really thinking with our emotions, and we're not thinking about a profit. We're not thinking about how the margins look. And even for organizations that do operate in data points, it often gets clouded by the emotional impact of it, because no one wants to sit there and look at their animals as ones and zeros. We build connections with these animals, we build connections with the community. And so it's really hard to get that business mindset, because a lot of times people think that's what it is. You're just crossing out a number and you're going to the next. But it's important to kind of start that foundation, have that mission statement, set up those goals, and make them actionable. Regardless of how big the goal seems, you really can break it down to quarterly, monthly, and even weekly check-ins. And I know that that is hard to think about because, like I said, animal welfare, we are on a time constraint. Sometimes those animals get in and we need to make those decisions pretty quickly. And so, but I think it's important to kind of reel yourself back in and make sure that you're checking in with everybody when you get started with something. So like I said, from this slide, I really want people to take from this: have a mission statement. And if you don't, I love talking about these. I have started a multitude of businesses. I've ran my own. If you need help, I think every organization needs one, whether it's just you and your friend rescuing little puggies, or whether you are a large organization with 100 employees. Having a strong mission statement is really going to align everything that you do. And this is the perfect time to start. We're still in January, so like we can hit the ground running, and this can be like the best year ever. And so I'll go to the next one. So one of the organizations that I want to talk about, where you guys will see some of my data points, is the Florence County Animal Services. So this is kind of how I got my jump start into animal welfare. I started a community cat program in that county, and then it kind of spread out to the other counties. So that's another topic I can talk about all day. If you guys like community cats, I'm your girl. And so I want to show you guys just some of the actionable points and how you can actually see this in person. And for me, I like to think of programs as products. And in a business, you do not create a product without first identifying the problem. So I like to always think of the why, how, and who. This, if you take anything from this, I would like you guys to take this. This can be spread across your organization in every aspect, whether you're hiring, whether you're firing, whether you're starting in a program, whether you're implementing something new. And so I like to think about this as well because what I've noticed that this year and this time, we are in a very interesting space in animal welfare. We are being discovered by new audiences every day. I'm sure people have been on TikTok and social media, and you have seen somebody that has never interacted with animal welfare before, and now it's become their personality, and they're absolutely enthralled with our field. And so it's very exciting. But also, it's a reminder that there's always someone in your community that has no idea what we do. And so they don't know how shelters operate, they don't know why programs exist, and they don't know what we do as an organization. And so what I think is important when you're starting your program, to go back to a program is a product, it needs to be clear and intentional and understandable for the public. A lot of times we operate internally, and so when we're making things, we use abbreviations that the community doesn't know, and we operate on a mindset of like, they just have to know this. But I'll give you guys a great example for me. When I first got into my animal welfare, majority of my family thought I was a vet. Now, of course, you have to go to vet school, and I think that they would know if I had been to vet school. But because that's all they knew of animal welfare, there was no way there was a community cat coordinator or a marketing person for animal welfare. They knew vets. And so when I announced to my family that like I'm in animal welfare, everyone was like, "You're a vet. This is amazing." And I'm like, no, there's other aspects to it. But that also reminds me that even my family, who I talk about animal welfare a lot with, they don't really understand what we do. And these are the people that are going to participate in those programs. And so I think it's important for us to realize that when animals enter your care, regardless of how they entered, they came from a community and they're ultimately going to go back to a community through various different types of programs. So that's why I say I think it's important to make them clear and intentional to the public and not just internally. And so Florence County's Community Cat Project, my baby, is a great example of how applying this framework in practice. So we have the why, how, and the who. So the why, this is the simple part. What is the problem that we're actually trying to solve? In Florence County specifically, the goal was clear. We wanted to reduce euthanasia and improve life-saving outcomes. And the how. So the how is kind of what the strategy is. And so for me, the how that I use for here is I didn't coin this phrase, but I like to use the hot zone method. And I think this method can also be used for a multitude of different programs. And it's basically just analyzing the data. Florence County is a open intake municipal shelter. So they had a lot of data and a lot of call logs that we could go through and different things that they had already done throughout the years. And so I did the hot zone method and I analyzed the intakes and I analyzed the call data so that we can really target and focus our resources on a specific area to have the greatest impact. So we already have done the why. We wanted to reduce euthanasia. We have the how. And this how, I kind of use the blanket term, but this how can be expanded to grants. You know, how are we going to do this? Who do we need to be involved? But for this specific project, I use the hot zone method. And then the who. I feel like the who is very important in anything we do. And this can also be applied to starting your mission statement. And the who is impacted by this program, who needs to be involved for this program to succeed. For us identifying this specific area, we realized it wasn't just about the cats, it was also about the community that benefited from this. So at that time, the community and the shelter did not have the best relationship. And so while the cat situation did kind of put the fire to that, we also realized there was distrust on both sides. There was distrust on the officers, there was distrust in the community. And so when we thought about the who, we wanted to make sure we really identified who was going to impact. It was going to impact the cats, of course, community cats. It was going to impact the staff, and it was going to impact the community the most. And so that's kind of the why, how, and who in practice. And I think this framework is very critical, regardless of where you are in your organization. I'm sure we have so many different levels in this call of different people in different positions, whether you're a director, whether you're a manager, whether you're a kennel tech, whether you're just a volunteer helping, you can use this why, how, and who for yourself and try to identify the organizations you're working with and how their programs are working. And also, this is great for buy-in. I would love to talk about this for 10 million years, but I always hear organizations say, how can we get people to buy into this program? How can we get them to want to start a community cat project? How can we get them to want to do limited intake? How can we get them to want to do open adoptions? And I feel like the why, how, who is the best framework for you to use. I think it's even important for using it for volunteers. I've dealt with organizations where they have to change a policy and the volunteers don't fully understand why. And so this is very actionable where you can just explain that to them. You can explain it to your donor, you can explain it to your CEO, you can explain it to your managers. This is how we're doing it, this is why we're doing it, and this is who it is going to affect. And so that framework to me is just, it's really cool because it's really great to put on graphics. Like it's super actionable. You can put it at the top. We are starting intake diversion. Okay, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? And who is this really going to affect? And so I really think it's important to talk about that. When you're talking about intake diversion, that is a very broad topic. But when we break it down to how we can do it, who it's going to affect, and what's going to be the most actionable, I think it's really cool. And even for this specific shelter, a few of the things we were able to do for their intake diversion was pop-up clinics. So we noticed that they have a specific ordinance that if an animal is unvaccinated, the owner gets a fine. And so those animals were coming into the care of the shelter in various different ways for various different reasons. And this was just an add-on to the fines that the person would have to pay. And the likelihood of them coming to get their animal, it dropped because now they didn't realize that there was this ordinance. And so we started doing pop-up vaccines. And I know this one is a little bit hard for everybody to participate in, depending on where you are. You may not have access to veterinarian care. And of course, there's so many other resources out there where we can kind of like manipulate that in a way that helps you and helps the community. But there are so many different versions of intake diversion that don't include a veterinarian care. Of course, we would love to all have a vet at our access just like immediately, because that would just solve a lot of our problems. And then the next thing is adoption accessibility. And so I know this is a topic that I hear a lot when I go to conferences, when I'm talking to people in animal welfare about their ideology on what we should do when it comes to adoptions. Open adoptions, limited adoptions, managed adoptions, how far should we go when we're diving into the lives of others? And I think it is very important to, again, get back to that why, how, and who. When you're looking at an animal and you're looking at somebody that wants to adopt it, I know that some places have certain parameters set up, but we really need to think about why we're doing this. So we want to get this animal out. Why are we stopping this specific person from getting this animal? How are we doing that? Is it in a way that is really practical? And who is it affecting? If that animal doesn't go home with this person, is it affecting that person more, or is it affecting the animal more to stay in your care? Or even just staff morale. Not many people want to see an animal not get adopted because, that's kind of ultimately one of the things that we want. We want those animals to leave our shelters in a positive light. And so the key takeaway from this is it's important to realize that programs don't just succeed. When you see somebody, when you see an organization, and it seems like, oh, they're just doing so much better than us, it's because they have more funding. It's because they have more people. they succeed because they're intentionally designed and clearly communicated with the program, with the community. And so, yes, that organization may have more money. Yes, that organization may have more staff, but also at the core of it, they had a program that should have succeeded regardless of where it went. And so the Florence County CAP program was amazing for me to be a part of because it ultimately went to the next county. And I used the same framework and I basically handed them a folder saying, here's how you get your program started. And now that's two counties that just were able to take this on. And it wasn't because I was there, I started it, but it was because I had an actionable list of things to do and it was intentional. And I wanted to make sure that this program didn't just start and fizzle out, that it could be sustainable for that organization and for any organization that wanted to do it. And so, we tracked a lot of the data, and then we were able to explain that to the next county that, hey, this is the hiccups that we had. This is the hiccups you don't have to have. And this is also how you can keep this program going. And so I love talking about programs because it's really important to give back to the community. Again, those animals are coming from that community and those animals are ultimately going back to a community. So making sure that they're really aware of what's going on and how programs work, it just helps out everywhere. And for the next one, so to go into the program maintenance and sustainability. And so I really like this, the define the problem, implement it, track it, adjust, and maintain. So I think this is important. It kind of goes to what I was just explaining. Maintaining a program, I feel like, is one of the biggest ways that you can kind of see if it's going to be a success or a failure. Many programs, of course, as we know, are grant funded or donor sponsored. And without them being intentionally maintained, even a strong program won't succeed. So a lot of times, I think, as we all know, we usually have one key employee that manages a program. It usually becomes like their baby, their bread and butter. And when that person leaves, that program usually falls to the wayside. And it's very unfortunate because we often invest a lot of resources into those. And so it's really tricky to know whether you should start the program or not because you're kind of basing it on if it's going to succeed or not. And when you ask yourself the questions, can it realistically succeed? Can it be maintained? And I think it's important to be honest about our capacity of sustainability, because sometimes when we're starting a program, we're in the space of that one person can take it on and it's going to skyrocket. It's going to be great. But we also need to think about what happens if that person does leave. If they just have a family problem that arises where, it's something that's taking them away from the program. So I always like to talk about being realistic about your capacity because we're often given opportunities in animal welfare where it seems like we can affect a large area. And then when we really get into what resources we have, we might not have the resources to maintain it. And so it's important to really remember that and like, what can you do as an organization? And sometimes taking those programs and bringing them down so they're smaller and they can really maintain for you, I think that's important. And so here's some key steps to maintain programs. Track outcomes continuously. I think it's important that same to the annual goals. When we set up goals, we need to consistently be checking in on them. To go to the business aspect, when we launch a new product, we're always checking the sales. We're checking the metrics. We're checking the ads. We're making sure that when that product goes out, somebody is consistently watching if it's dropping, if it's increasing. And so I think it's important to use the same for our outcomes because what we usually do is we start an amazing program and it sounds like it's going good. And we're just like, well, no, it's fine. But we're not really tracking the outcomes until something either happens or we get to the end of the year and now we're kind of rushing to see what happened. As we all know, animal welfare is very stressful. And so if you start something at the beginning of the year and you don't check back in until the end, there are so many things that have happened in between that time that even if the data did drop, you're not going to get the full picture because you weren't checking it as it was continuously happening. So first, track your outcomes continuously. And I know that that might seem very broad, track it, track it, track it, but you can just check in with everybody who's working on it because that leads into the next thing about adjusting the workflows. So it's the same with the who and the how and the where or the how. It is important to make sure that we're going back to that how and who. And so if we set out a program to affect this community, but it's not affecting we need to adjust the workflows. And then, of course, plan for sustainability, just making sure that the program can transition from grant funding to an operation budget if it can. And also, the big thing is keeping the mission central. So we already know that we have a mission statement, and now everything that we put into our organization needs to go back to what that mission statement is. And so to kind of show you guys how the why and the how and the who framework works, why is this program essential and what problem does it solve? How can we adapt and maintain this impact? And who's being served? If your target or audience is not being reached, adjustments are necessary. And so that goes back to the reevaluating. We want to ensure that we're delivering meaningful outcomes, and not just kind of throwing things out there because they seem good. And so, for example, I'll give the example for Florence County. We knew that it was a grant funded program from the beginning. And so we started in 2023. And so for that entire time, we had already planned to meet with county administrators and just kind of help them slowly transition this into their operating budget. We kind of knew that they could. And I know that's not always the case for organizations, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't just leaving the program alone when that grant ended. And so I'm happy to announce they have continued this program. They took over the funding in early 2025. They hired a person to take over this program. And so they have a fully functioning, sustainable community cat project that is not just reliant on our organization to kind of start that foundation. And so for me, I feel like it's a very strong example of maintaining it. Throughout, we tracked the data, we let the county administrators know how it was going. And then as we kind of got further into the program, we made sure we put not barriers, we made sure we put things in place so that they can transition it over to themselves. So that's kind of how I see it, define the problem, implement it, track it, adjust, and maintain it. And this is my favorite thing to talk about. Okay, so the community experience is a business strategy. So one of the most important lessons that I feel like translates from business to sheltering is every interaction matters. The person that you're talking to right now at your front desk could be a volunteer, could end up being an employee, can be a donor, can be an adopter. And so I want to really talk about how positive we need to be, even when it's not positive for us. And so oftentimes, like I said, animal welfare is extremely emotionally charged. We often don't see how we come across to others because we're constantly going through things, but every interaction matters. No matter how small it is, if you just got off work and you still have your shirt on and you're trying to just get groceries, you have to remember that how the public sees us changes how our programs operate. One person saying, "Oh, I talked to somebody from their organization. They were really rude to me." That can change how other people interact. So I think it's important to make sure that we treat people who are interacting with our organization as customers. And I know they're not purchasing things from us, but when you think about loyalty points at Walmart or your favorite coffee place, they make sure that every interaction they have with you is going to be a positive one. If you go to Starbucks, you've probably noticed they've lately been writing like smiley faces on all of the cups or like thank yous and like have a great day. Chick-fil-A has their, my pleasure. And so it's important. Yes, you don't have to become a robot. I'm not saying make all your staff members say my pleasure after they interact, but just make sure that they remember that some of these people that are meeting us, this is the first time they've ever interacted with animal welfare professionals. And
Hey,
so,
Clarissa, this is Kelly York. I was referred to um, Dr. Alcott by Sawara Veterinary Surgery.
Okay.
I saw.
and so I just kind of want to get to like how we discussed, for example, in slide 2, I kind of spoke about the adopting the 30 more dogs. Okay, so we know what we want to do. And so we have 30 more dogs that we want to adopt out in this month. And so breaking that goal down to actionable things is really important. It could be things from scheduling volunteers to boosting social media to coordinating with your behavioral team. And so every small step in that process is an opportunity to engage with the community more. And I feel like that example was the perfect thing because adopting out more dogs, we need more community members. And oftentimes we can't make more. We usually need to find ones that we've never interacted with. And so that's important when we think about how much we engage with the community and how positive we need to be with them. And I feel like it's important to understand that when I say every interaction matters, I mean it on like the deepest level possible. Something as small as making sure that you are greeting your foster when they come in. Even if it's a long-term foster, even if they know the deal, they just come in, they pick up the stuff they need and they leave, still making sure that they feel valued because you never know what they're telling their family members when they get home. They're doing it for the passion of the animal, but just that small interaction of ignoring them and you're not doing it on purpose. Oftentimes we aren't because we usually say, I've been in the situation where I'm like, oh, she just knows where to go. She'll just go to the back and get the cat traps. But that interaction could be the reason that she doesn't come back to volunteer or she doesn't refer the program to somebody else. So I think it's important to remember that. And then for my next thing, I'm doing really good on my time, guys. I love to talk if you guys can't notice. And so I will talk all day and night, and I have been practicing this with my mom. And so I'm really happy that I'm on time. And so I really want to do closing thoughts. I know that I kind of threw a lot of stuff at you guys. And so I want to just kind of get back to like what we're talking about. We already know we need a mission statement. We know we need to break it down into measurable directions. So those are setting those goals. And then we need to just kind of see how we can put those programs in place, that how, why, and who. And so I don't want this to be overwhelming. I know for me, I talk in a sense of I have a business degree and I kind of wanted to show that in, how we talk to people in animal welfare. I may be talking in terms that don't come across as easy as they should. And so I wanted to really make sure that everybody was, comfortable and understanding. And I would love to talk more about this. But I think it's important to remember that when shelters treat community members consistently and they support their staff intentionally, and having strong operations is not separate from life saving. So, like when you're focused on those operations, I know it may seem like, well, we're not doing the groundwork. We're not out there in those communities. They're life saving. Having a rooted and grounded operational sense is really going to help your organization skyrocket. And it's really going to help you because when shelters operate efficiently, your staff stays longer, your community builds trust in you, and most importantly, animals survive. And so I want you guys to think back to like some of the examples I discussed, breaking those big goals into actionable steps, tracking outcomes, and engaging with the community. There are very practical ways to put life saving in place. And even though the business of it all may seem very far-fetched because most people don't equate business with animals, I think it's important to realize that there is a connection there. And when you really lay heavy in that, you can operate on a level that you probably never knew you could. And so yeah, that's everything that I have for my slides.
Thank you so much, Han. That was amazing. You're getting so much love in the chat. I don't know
Oh,
if you
thank you,
can
because I
see
can't
it.
see it. So I'm trying to focus.
Lots of love, lots of like, oh, I'm going to watch that again on demand just to make sure that I can go
Um,
back and get all the details that I can. So I'm also really glad that we have a good amount of time for questions. So we'll jump into that. But also just thank you because I think a lot of the points you make, animal welfare can get very theoretical sometimes. And so I
yes.
love when like you break it down into very
Yeah.
tangible things. So thank you for that. Let's jump into the first question, which is we are in the process of creating a draft for our strategic goals following a board retreat last week where board members worked on goals for the year. Do you have an efficient goal template that you've used and would be willing to share?
Yes, I do. I love setting goals. The easiest way for me to kind of explain it, I don't have it like super handy where I can like share my screen again. But I think it's important. The template that I have can go across many levels. I started it when I first started up doing businesses, and then I've been able to translate it to animal sheltering. So I do have a super easy template. I don't know what the best way to, I think my information will be shared so I can like email and connect and I can email you the template and I kind of go over some more of it. But it's super easy to look at. A lot of the stuff I do is very easy because I understand that while I spend an extensive time in my educational background learning business, most of the people that I operate with they don't. We went through different walks of life. And so the big theories that I learned in school, I love to break them down. So yes, I do have a template that I can share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we will share your information on Maddie's forum, and you can also share the template on Maddie's forum.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. That would be great. Yeah.
So the next question we have is, so many shelters struggle to utilize their own data to inform their work. Do you have any advice for shelters, excuse me, shelter folks who feel intimidated by trying to tap into their own data?
Yes, your programs will not succeed if you're not comfortable with looking at your data. I think it's important for everybody to understand that data does seem like a lot, especially there are many different organizations, national organizations, as we all know, that look at data differently. We're talking about life-saving rates, return to home, and different things like that. So I know that it gets intimidating, but I want to make sure that everybody stresses the point of you cannot invest in an organization that doesn't invest in themselves. And so the first thing you need to do is really look at your data. So if you're going to your donors or your board and you're saying, hey, I really think it's important for us to start a new program, and you don't have any data to back that up, whether it's going to succeed or fail. I know that it's hard, especially because I realize coming from a data background, I'm a data nerd. I code, I make Excel spreadsheets. It's my bread and butter. I ran my own business. So like finances and numbers, they're like in my head all day. And so for me personally, it's super easy. And I started dealing with shelters where I realized they don't know how to do it and it really seems hard. So the advice I would give is just make sure you stress that a point that we can't invest in anything if we don't know what we're investing in. We don't know where the organization is going. And so I think it's important to just make sure that they remember that any program you start, anything you're going to do, you have to be rooted in why are we doing this and why hasn't something like this worked in the past? And the only way to know that is if you really go through and analyze your data. And it's not that hard. There's so many more people out there too that will help you. And I know that also seems intimidating. You don't want to share your information. You don't know how people are going to judge you. But I really think community is important in animal welfare. So like talk to your neighbors, talk to somebody, even if they're in a different field and like you just want to get like a basic understanding of like, how do I get these numbers to others and how do they understand it? And so I think it's important to just remember that you got to invest in yourself in order to continue the mission of your program.
For sure. We have one more question here, but then also we're really good on time. So if anybody
Okay.
else has questions, please feel free, take advantage. Um, how often do you communicate to the entire organization, including donors and volunteers, throughout the year, how goals are being accomplished?
Quarterly, I think most people operate quarterly. Personally, I feel like it depends on how this level was started. So if we know that there is a action, like how I gave the example of adopting out dogs, and we know that there are many parts of our organization that's involved, I think at a strategic level and internally, we should be operating weekly. And I know that may seem hard because if a program's not doing bad necessarily, why do we keep checking in with that area? But it also really just helps us make sure everyone has the same picture. So for me personally, I think everyone digests things better quarterly, but internally, I think weekly, so that when you get to that quarterly level, we kind of know what led up to that. And I think that we all know in animal welfare, the storytelling behind numbers is huge. You may see an organization that numbers have dipped and their life saving has changed, but you don't realize that that organization just lost their director or their funding just got cut. And so I think it's important when you stretch out that amount of time in between, you lose the story aspect of it. And so it's kind of harder to get that point across if you're only meeting yearly or even if you're only meeting quarterly, because you have to push all of that in that past quarter into one meeting that's digestible, that's actionable. And so I think internally, depending on what the program is, meet weekly. And then depending on who else you need to push that information up to, then you can meet quarterly.
I did see somebody say part two in the chat. So just get that rolling. I'm sure
Oh,
Maddie's would love
yes.
to have you back for a part two.
Yes. And I want to say this too, for everybody, because like I said, I know that a lot of the information I gave it's a lot and it seems very big, but when you break down something small, like if it's one task I can give you, when you go back to your organization, when you go back to your rescue, find something small that you're like, I really want to do this. And like, how can I do it? Why should I do it and who it's going to affect? That framework, if it's nothing you guys took from this Zoom call, or I just want you guys to know that that applies everywhere, even when you're thinking about hiring somebody new. If you're trying to get across that, hey, we need a foster coordinator. We've never had one before. Okay, how are we going to get one? Why do we need to get it? And who is it going to affect? And so that, when you think about it that way, anything you're thinking about in your organization can really be broken down to those questions. And then you just need to focus on how can we answer them. And of course, as we know, there are broader aspects. There are things about the funding, and then there are things about how can we get our organization to add a new position. But when you really break it down, you can start having those hard conversations when someone says, hey, no, I don't think we need that position. You can say, well, this is why we need it. This is how we can get it. And this is who it's going to affect. And then if they still say no, then we just keep going. We keep trying. But I think it's important to just like that framework is just, I always go back to that.
Thank you. One of the questions that came through was another example of your why, how, who. So thank you for that. I think we have time for at least one more. You mentioned Community Cats being a special program to you. Can you share one of the most valuable things you've learned targeted specifically at Community Cats or TNR?
Yes, the community in community cats matters the most. Oftentimes, we are very focused on the animals. I know it's animal welfare, so I love it, but we forget that the community is what the community cats are going back to, and the community is who's going to take care of them. And so, for me, that community cat program was very important because, like I said, that specific shelter did not have a strong connection with the community. So, I already knew that this was going to have to bridge that gap. They were going to have to feel comfortable with each other. They were going to have to be each other's confidant because when I wasn't there, I wanted them to be able to connect with each other. And so I could talk about community cats for years because I absolutely love that framework as well because I like investing in communities. Again, one thing, another thing, I know I keep saying one thing you can take from this, but another thing to take from this is your community does matter. They're the people that those animals are coming from and going to and are interacting with your organization. So when you're starting your community cat program, yes, identify the areas that are in need most, but find your community members who want to participate. You will be surprised how many people love community cats. I know that there's like a large group of people, I've met them where they're like, I don't really care about those cats. But the amount of people for that program that came together and was like, I'll trap my own cats. I'll buy my own traps. You just show me how to do it and I'll do it. It was amazing to see that organization and that community now from 2023 to now in 2026. They're like a well-oiled machine. Like they work together, the animal control officers, the directors. And so your community matters. And to just remember that like most people don't know what a community cat is. And so even when we get into it, we're very emotional and we're like, we have to save them all. Yes, but also that guy doesn't know what that means. He doesn't know what an ear tip is. He doesn't know what TNR is. And so, he may be a little distant, but he would be like that with anything new. And so just remembering that like, while we live in animal welfare every day, we breathe it, we sweat it, we love it. Those community members usually don't interact with us at all. And so they just don't know what that is. So that's one thing I could say about community cats. But again, my LinkedIn and everything will be shared. If you want to talk more community cats, I can talk. I love community cats.
I'm so glad we connected on LinkedIn because I think we have a lot to talk about, me and you. But we have time for our last question, which was for people without business backgrounds. Are there particular topics or resources you would recommend to help leaders bring some of those principles into our work?
Yes, anything with human resources. I actually have a few book recommendations too. I have a book I read called The First 90 Days when I was in college, and you can get it on Amazon. I'm actually looking at a copy of it right now. I go back to this book all the time. I think it's important because what people don't realize with businesses, everything operates as a business. And so the first 90 days kind of goes through HR perspectives, operationals, and it is very operationals based. It goes through those ideas of mission statements and things. And if you would have told me when I was in college years ago that I would be picking up a book for my business degree to learn how to work with an animal shelter, I would have said, okay, no, I'm going to play the lottery first because that likely is going to win first. But I have so many of my business books that also on the Maddie's Forum I can recommend. They're super easy to read. They're not like heavy on the academics, but they're just like easy digestible things. And so like for me, that book, The First 90 Days specifically, it really ties in the HR perspective and the operation skills. And I like that because a lot of us, whether you work for a large organization or not, if you are a smaller rescue, just you and your friend, or just a smaller brick and mortar, we don't go through those levels. We usually don't have an HR person, a finance person, a marketing. We are all of that. And so I like to share things about business because most small business owners, that's what I was. Before I got a team, I was the marketing person. Before I got a team, I was HR. I was everything. And so I definitely can share those books with you guys and some more topics that I think are easy to digest and aren't hard for you to just like scheme over when you're trying to combine your business and your sheltering together.
Well, thank you so much, TyAnn, again for joining us. Thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us today. TyAnn will definitely be on Maddie's Pet Forum throughout the week, so feel free to drop more questions there. And then I will also, the question to kind of close us out a little bit today is how would your shelter's outcomes change if every adopter foster, donor, or community member was treated as a valued customer.
Thank you so much, TyAnn. This was such an incredible conversation. Definitely would love to discuss a part two. And a special thanks from my retired community cat, Jerry. He has an entire community invested in him. So you're absolutely right when you talk about community in that way.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Miguel, for being my co-host in January. It was amazing to kick off this new year with you. Everyone, please join me in thanking Miguel as well. And join us next week for a conversation with Animal Balance on expanding spay and neuter with MASH. If you're interested in a specific topic, or if you're interested in hosting or speaking on Maddie's community conversations, please go ahead and let us know on Maddie's Pet Forum. Thank you all so much. This was a really wonderful conversation.